Hi, the SI meteorologist, Paul Dorian here on Thursday, December 19th. Well, we're nearing the end of the month of December. Time to take a look at the sun to see what's going on with respect to solar cycle 24. Indeed, solar cycle 24 continues to be on a pace that would make it the weakest solar cycle in just over 100 years. Not since solar cycle 14 peaked in February of 1906 have we seen a solar cycle this week. Here's a current look at the sun. There are a couple of sunspot regions. Right here is one area of interest that should be monitored over the next couple of days or so. They're all rotating in this fashion, but you see on the rest of the solar surface, not all that much solar activity going on in terms of sunspots, and that has been the case despite the fact that this is the solar maximum for the current solar cycle, number 24. It's one of the weakest solar maximums that we have seen in a long time, and again, this particular solar cycle is on pace to be the weakest since solar cycle 14 way back in the early 1900s. Well, here's a look at the sunspot numbers for this current solar cycle, number 24, and it can be compared to the prior solar cycle, number 23. Here's where we stand right now in this region right in here. Again, we are at about halfway through the solar maximum phase of this particular solar cycle, but this maximum phase, even though it is a max phase, it is quite weak relative to other solar maximums in the past 50 years or so, and again, this is on pace to be the weakest solar cycle in 100 years. Here is solar cycle 23. Notice a downward trend, and this really has continued for the last 3 solar cycles now. A weaker and weaker solar cycle. There are some who are already predicting a weaker next solar cycle, number 25. Still a little early to make those predictions, but some solar scientists are leaning that way, and that would continue the trend for weaker and weaker solar cycles. Well, here's a real long-range look at the average sunspot numbers going way back to the 1700s. Here's where we stand right now. This is solar cycle 24. And again, notice that downward trend. The last few solar cycles have certainly been weaker and weaker. And again, there are some that predict the next one will be even weaker than this one. This particular solar cycle looks like it will be the weakest since this one right here, this is the solar cycle number 14 that peaked in February of 1906. It looks like this will be the weakest solar cycle since that one way back in the early 1900s. Now, what kind of consequences are happening as a result of the weak solar cycle? Well, we know that solar activity certainly has an impact on upper atmosphere temperatures in the thermosphere, which is near the top of the atmosphere, way up more than 100 kilometers above the ground level. And there's also an important indication from history that weak solar cycles can lead to cold global periods. In fact, let's take a look now, going back several hundred years, to a couple of well-known low solar activity time periods. And here's a chart that goes back 400 years showing sunspot observations, and there were 2 time periods, one called the Dalton minimum way back in this time period of the 1800s, and another the Maunder minimum. Both of these were decades-long periods of low solar activity, and indeed global temperatures were quite cold, quite a bit below normal during this both of these time periods. In fact, this whole time period that encompasses the Maunder minimum and the Dalton minimum is referred to by climatologists as the Little Ice Age, that really ran from about the 1300s to the middle part of the 1800s. So no one is predicting yet a Maunder minimum or a Dalton minimum, but we will need to continue to follow these solar cycles over the next couple of solar cycles, 5, 10, 15 years or so, as again the trend has been for weaker and weaker solar cycles, and the current one is on pace to be the weakest one in just over 100 years. We'll continue to monitor all of this over the upcoming months here at the SIweather.com. That's it for now. I'm the SI meteorologist, Paul Dorian.